This class is all about art journaling. I became an art journaler quite by accident. In fact, I was doing art journaling when I didn't even realize that's what it was called. And I thought, I wonder if anybody else does this, because I started looking around and exploring the subject. When I first heard the term art journaling, I started exploring to see if anybody else did it. You know what I discovered? I found out a bunch of my friends were doing it. We each do it a little bit differently, but most of the time we use similar supplies. And I thought, I just bet there are a lot of people out there that might be interested in doing this cool hobby or self-expression, that maybe they need a little help in finding supplies or suggestions for supplies, or just maybe trying out some new supplies, but you don't want to buy them yet. You just want to kind of find out about them. So that's the purpose of this class. It's how to get started art journaling. Now, the first thing I want to do is show you my very first accidental art journal. And that would be this book right here. Now, it's no coincidence that it has my name across the bottom of it. That is me. I am Barb Owen. And this book is all about when I got, for lack of a better term, my life got interrupted, shall we say, by my parents, my elderly parents, who needed some extra help and care. And as time went on, of course, they needed a lot of extra care. And that's where the title came from, because normal evaporated for all of us. So normal didn't live with us anymore. Not with them, not with me, not with anyone. And so this book became the basis, or grew out of my journals, my written journals. Well, don't you know that when I was finished doing the writing of the book, someone said to me, "You really need to illustrate it." And I was like, I'm not an illustrator. I don't know how to illustrate a thing. I don't have a clue how to illustrate anything. I don't know the first place to begin. But it was kind of a good challenge. And so within this book, I'm going to show you the actual illustrations here in a minute. Sprinkled throughout the book, there are images, you can see over here, all the way throughout the book. And those images are simply, as I discovered in later, as I later went through the process of discovery about art journaling, I realized that this is simply a big art journal with words in it. A lot of words, but this is an art journal because it has a lot of images in it. So I thought that I would show you that was my very first art journal and just give you a little bit of a glimpse into that very first experience into art journaling. So I'm not going to bore you with all of these, but I am going to show you some of them because I thought it might be kind of an interesting process just for you to see where I really began in the whole art journaling thing. So this is obviously the image from the front cover of the book. So here's the front cover. So there's the cover, and there's the artwork. That's the image from the cover. And additional hands are very important to me. They always have been important to me, and so I use a lot of hands in what I do. These are just a lot of these are just doodle images that we use throughout the book. Some of the images are quite poignant, but each and every one of them illustrates some aspect of the journey I took with my parents. So it's just art journaling. That's all it is. And this was done on single sheets of paper. It's just single sheets of paper. It's actually sketchbook paper. It's not even watercolor paper. I didn't even know enough to use watercolor paper. This is sketchbook paper and inexpensive watercolors and pen and ink. And that's it. So this, you don't have to have fancy supplies. You don't have to have fancy paper. I mean, this isn't even good paper to use for what I was using it for. But it's the only thing I knew to use at the time. So that, and this entire thing, this entire stack of pages, there's a whole raft of pages. Some of them have multiple images on a page. This whole stack of pages became the basis for my first art journal. So you don't have to have anything real fancy. And the container that I use for this particular art journal, it's a box that a piece of computer equipment came in. It's just a box. So you don't even have to have anything fancy to house your art journal. And it was interesting when I thought about that and discovered that indeed that was exactly what I had done in this process. I wrote the book and then I simply illustrated it. Not being an illustrator, I just simply expressed what the words said to me in images. And that, in a nutshell, is art journaling. Now, when you get started art journaling, if you really want to get into, shall we say, proper art journaling, which means you are using some kind of book that's bound together rather than, a bunch of single sheets of paper like I did, you're going to need something to start with. So I'm going to show you a couple of different journals here. Now, there is an entire class that I've recorded for you just on art journals, because there's the variety of art journals out there is pretty incredible. So this is like this is the Cliff Notes version, if any of you remember Cliff Notes. This is a Cliff Notes version of art journals. So this is one of my favorite journals. This is the Strathmore Visual Journal, and this is the small size. It is 5.5 by 8 inches, and it is really nice paper. It's a nice weight of paper. It's a 90-pound, nice weight paper, and it does a good job of accepting different kinds of media like inks and sprays and things like that. It also comes in a larger size, and this is the 9 by 12 version. The paper is heavier in this. This is a 140-pound paper, where the small one is a 90-pound paper. Yes, 90-pound paper. And this one doesn't have as many sheets in the book, but the paper is much heavier, and it allows you to glue and tape and paint and spray and all kinds of stuff in these. So this is a really nice journal, the Strathmore Mixed Media Journals. There's also a Strathmore journal. It's not the visual journal. It gets a bit confusing, I have to tell you, because Strathmore makes visual journals in different kinds, but they're called Visual Mixed Media Journals. But they also make this with the yellow cover on it currently, called the Mixed Media Journals. And so this is also a 90-pound paper. This is the 300 series. This is also 90-pound paper. It's a little different size than the small visual journal, but it's really great for mixed media, and it comes in different sizes. So that's another option. Of course, there's the Canson Mixed Media Journal as well, and that's a nice one. Paper is not super heavy, but it's a nice journal to use for art journaling as well. Now this one is becoming much loved. And this one is the Diane Reevely's Dilutions Creative Journal. And this one, it's configured a little bit differently. And in the journals class, I actually go through and talk a little bit more in detail about what this journal, the paper and so forth. But it's a nice journal, and it as long as you let layers dry and don't force the paper too fast with wet stuff, because if you get too much wet stuff on it, it will start to pill the surface of the paper. But if you can, give it some time and just, give it some dry layers and that kind of thing, it will take a lot. Like this is a very dimensional page. This has a lot of dimension on it and a lot of inks and paints and stuff, and it worked just fine. So I like this journal a lot as well. So again, that's the Diane Reevely's Delusions Creative Journal. And then you don't have to spend a lot of money to get going on art journaling. You can just get yourself a composition notebook. Now these are, or any kind of notebook for that matter. The reason I like this one is because it's stitched in here, and so it doesn't tend to fall apart on you. I've never had one of these fall apart. Now, the only way that they'll fall apart is if you rip out a page here. The page that is the other half of that page, and wherever it is in the back, is going to eventually come out. So that's the only thing you have to be aware of, because they are put in here in signature form. What I do with these, to use these, is I take glue stick and I put glue stick on one side and glue stick on the other side and glue the pages together. And I do that through the whole thing. So it first of all reduces the number of pages that you have in the journal, because it's, to start out with, they have 100 sheets, which equals 200 pages. And that's a lot, and by the time you put paint and ink and collage and stuff, that really gets really thick if you do just the individual pages. Anyway, I digress. I just use a glue stick, a good juicy glue stick, and I put glue on one side and glue on the other side, and then I stick the pages together and I squeegee them so that they get a really good adhesion, and then let it dry really well. And that is what I've done to this whole thing. And so it has some nice sturdy pages, and you can do a lot of stuff with these. I usually typically put gesso on the surface just to beef it up just a little bit more. Okay, that's the short version of how to select an art journal. So the next thing we're going to talk about is stencils. And stencils can be found lots of places. And I have just a few of my stencils in this box to show you. And so we're going to talk about all different kinds of options for stencils. And you can spend money on stencils, or you can make your own stencils, or you can use found objects for stencils. All of those work really well in art journaling. This, for example, I put it against black so that you could see it. This was a piece of plastic transparency that you use, that you run through your computer, and a die cut film strip die, and I just ran it through. And although it's very delicate plastic, it would appear, it's really quite hardy. And so you can put this on your art journal page, and you can spray ink through it, you can sponge ink through it. There's all kinds of things you can do. So even using your die cuts from, if you have a die cutting machine, using your dies, you can actually create some of your own stencils that way. Or you can find stencils around your house. Now this is a much loved, well used stencil, as I'm sure you can tell. But this is the bottom of a paper plate holder. So the rim has been cut off, but it is meant to support paper plates, so that, like when you go to a picnic, you don't want the plate to fall, and you know how they do, they'll collapse with food on them. And so this is the bottom of that paper plate holder, and it works wonderfully as a stencil. This is one of my favorite stencils. It's, what did it cost? Nothing. This is a piece of produce bag. And produce bag is like something has grapefruit that comes in it, or lemons, or oranges, that kind of stuff. But this was plastic, and it's got a great pattern in it. And when you do art journaling, using pattern and texture is just the bee's knees, I'll tell you. These are some inexpensive letter stencils, and the cool part about these is you can flip them over. And I really don't pay too much attention to whether the letters are the right way around or the wrong way around. but I like having different sizes of stencils, and they're really not very expensive either, which is, it's just nice to have options for things that are quite reasonable in cost. Then you can get into, of course, commercial stencils, and these are commercial stencils from the Crafters Workshop. There's all different companies that make stencils now. It's quite the thing to use, and people use them in all different kinds of ways. So these are just some of the stencils. They come, the Crafters Workshop line of stencils come in 12 by 12 and 6 by 6, I believe. And there may be some of them that even come in 8 by 10 or 8.5 by 11. But you can see that sometimes you'll have a stencil that doesn't have much vacant space to spray through or to paint through. And then again, you may have one like this one that has a lot more space that your media is going to go through. But basically a stencil is just anything that you lay down, that you apply something over the surface and it patterns whatever is below. So you can lay this on your sheet in a page in your art journal, and you can spray some ink through it, or you can sponge some paint through it, and then you get this lovely paint and goodness on the surface. Then you can turn it over and lay it down on another page to transfer the paint or ink or whatever, and it's wonderful. So much fun. Here's some examples of some more found stuff that you can use for stencils. This is drywall tape. So this is that's all it is. It's a drywall tape. This stuff is real handy to use for lots of different things, and it comes in different configurations with holes and all different kinds of things. This one is a grid pattern. This is rug hooking canvas, where you can do rug hooking, obviously. It's great, makes a nice pattern. This is called punchinella or sequin waste, and this comes in all different kinds of shapes. This is what they use to punch sequins from when they're making sequins, and this is what's left over, hence the name sequin waste, and or punchinella is the other name for it. And it is really fun. You can sponge paint on top of it and use it as kind of a stamp, or you can lay it on your page and you can spray through it. You can sponge paint through it, directly through it. There's lots of things you can do with punchinella. And as I said, it comes with lots of different shapes and different size holes. So sometimes you can find it where the holes are nice and big also. And this stuff, this is cool stuff. This is the stuff that you put under rugs, like throw rugs, to keep them from slipping. And it's not very heavy, but it makes some really interesting patterns because you have these little bumps in it, so it's not a smooth texture like some of the other pieces. Now this is fencing. This is just a piece of fencing that they use. You'll see it sometimes in construction sites. Now don't go and rip off the construction site fencing. But if you find it periodically, in a dumpster area or somebody's trash pile, they're not going to care if you take a piece of it. So, but this makes some really interesting patterns on your art journal pages too for stenciling. This stuff is very, very inexpensive, and it comes from the Craft and Hobby store, and it's plastic canvas. It actually looks like this. It is when it's new. And after you've sprayed ink and stuff through it, it will discolor like this. It comes in a variety of grid sizes, and it comes in some shapes. And it also comes in a circle pattern like this versus the square pattern. So what I did with this was I just took scissors and I cut out the center, so that way I had a ring and a circle, but I can just lay them back together if I want to have the whole circle shape also. This is another die cut, waste from a die cut, but that makes some interesting shapes. You don't even have to do the whole thing. You can just do part of it to get some of the shape. This happens to be cut out of fun foam. This is plastic. This is an old piece of an old plastic doily. So plastic is great because it holds up long term. Sometimes you can find those at garage sales and tag sales and things like that. Now these are doilies that are fabric. So it's just a fabric doily. This holds up quite well as also, and you find them in different patterns. So different kinds of patterns. And then they're really, when you're finished using them as a stencil, you can sew them onto something, sew them onto a book cover. This is a paper doily, and it works nicely too, but it's quite delicate. So you might even want to put a coat of varnish, water-based varnish or something on top of the paper to give it a little bit of body, you know, when you're working with it. That will help preserve it for a little while longer. But again, nice patterns. This is another piece of plastic. This is a plastic table runner, and this great patterns, and it just lasts forever. This is a piece of paper that had hole reinforcements. You can see the little rings there that you put on paper, you know, your notebook paper when the hole has pulled out, you know, like a punched 3-ring binder type paper. And a hole is pulled out, and you can reinforce it with those hole punches. Now again, this is paper. It's not going to last forever, but it'll last and give you some interesting impressions. You can also use things like lace. This is a fabric lace. You can use paper lace, and so that's just punched with a punch, like a Martha Stewart or an EK Success kind of punch, and punched lace. Don't forget about the kids sections for stencils. All of these came from the children's section in a discount store. So there's 4 patterns on each one of these little sheets, and they are very inexpensive, and you can do some really great things with those. And this is a book that I found in a bin of, you can see that was the price. It was in the bargain book bin, $4, and it was half of that. But what this is different kinds of letter stencils. And I know this is going to be really challenging for you to see. Let's see if we can do it this way. Get the light. There we go, so you can see. So it's letter stencils. And the cool part about these in this little book is that they pull out, and then you can just put them back in. Pop them back in. So you get to see what the letters are behind it, and it's just full. The book is full of all different kinds of letter stencils. So don't hesitate when you see those bargain bins of books and stuff. Look through them, because you just never know what you might find in there. And then get yourself a container, or another great way to store your stencils is in you can get those big scrapbooks, the 12 by 12 scrapbooks that have the plastic sleeves in them, and you can slip your stencils down inside those, which is really a nice way to store them. So that's your stencils. So the next thing we want to talk about is stamps, and that's what this whole yummy basket of goodness is here. So these are stamps, different kinds of stamps. One of the things that's cool to use for stamps is bubble wrap. And that's all this is. This is a piece of bubble wrap. You can see that I've used it quite a bit. You just sponge paint on it, or you can use a brayer and you can roll paint on it and then turn it over and stamp with it. And bubble wrap comes in an assortment of sizes of bubbles, and each one of them gives you a pretty cool pattern in your art journal. And when it's done, you know, when it's all said and done, and it won't stamp anymore if you've lost all the air out of the bubbles, then you can actually use that as a textural element on a page if you want, or on a canvas. Another thing that's kind of fun to use are the foam stamps, and these are not expensive to use. This is an alphabet set. These are just some well-loved foam stamps that cost very little. Most of them I picked up when they were reduced to just a few cents actually. And to use these are best with acrylic paint applied to them. And so I use these little makeup wedges, and I just apply acrylic paint, tap it on the foam surface, and then turn it over and stamp with it. Now these are big, bold images, and with foam stamps, that's what you get, is the big, bold images. But they make some really cool background effects. So foam stamps are excellent to use. You can also buy a ton of stamps to use in your art journals. These are some of Diane Reevely's stamps, and so I'm just going to flip through these so you can see. She has a very eclectic, funky, fun style, and she does lots of modular things so you can combine things together, and it really stimulates your imagination in how you want to put these things together. You know, she has all these fun different heads and bodies, and if you don't want to use the body from one or the head from one, you can use a different head on it. You can use mushrooms let the mushroom be the body. It's nice that she gives you the opposite wings, so you can do things like that. Lots of border stamps. And of course your seasonal things. But she does lots of just fun things, lots of fun background kinds of things. She does a lot of kind of scribbling. She uses her designs from some of her doodling in her own journals are the basis for some of her designs. Lots of fun. So this is called red rubber, and sometimes you'll see the red rubber stamps. It may be red, it may be pink, it may be gray, but it is rubber, and these stamps last a long time. And the way her stamps are done, they're put on a cushion foam, and they will stick to a stamp block or a CD case. Anything that's plastic, they'll stick to that, and you can use that as your stamping surface. The nice thing about stamps like this versus stamps like this, which are also red rubber, this is also a red rubber stamp, is that this is mounted on wood. And if you'd had all of these stamps mounted on wood, you're going to have a really big box full of stamps. So the thing that's nice about this, that they're doing more of these days, is taking, instead of mounting them all on wood, they're putting them on the foam like this that will adhere to your stamp blocks, an acrylic stamp block or whatever you're using. And it just makes these so much more, it's just easier to store. So, having said that, however, I still there are certain stamps that I will keep on the wood block. Sometimes I take them off, but something like this I'll leave on the wood block. I have a couple of other examples here of ones that I removed from the wood block. These, for example, these were mounted on wood, and I took them off the wood. This was the same thing, because I tend to use these as in flexible ways. So I'll ink it, and then I'll roll it and stamp parts of it in my journal rather than trying to get an even beautiful impression. I'm not interested in that, but some people are. And so if you're one of those that likes the even beautiful impressions, then you might stick with the wood block or mount your stamps on some kind of a solid surface. You'll probably find as you go through accumulating stamps, which are really a nice addition to use in your art journaling, you'll probably find that certain motifs kind of reoccur in what you do. Butterflies tend to show up in what I do a lot. And so I'm attracted to different forms of butterflies, like the botanical types. I like the interesting kind of funky looking butterflies as well. But don't be surprised if you find yourself buying or being at least attracted to similar kinds of stamps and things. Always look in the bargain bins or the clearance sections. You can see the original price and you can see the clearance price. And these again are red rubber red rubber stamps with the cushion on them, the foam cushion on them. So don't hesitate to look in your clearance sections, because sometimes you can find stamps that maybe you wouldn't use for other purposes, but they're perfect for art journaling. So here's another example. I like clocks, I like words, I like keys, so I'm often attracted to those. And then don't limit yourself to small stamps. This is a great, really big flower stamp, and this happened to be one that I found someplace that was marked way down as well. But these big stamps like this is another one that's actually in 3 parts, so you can use it in different sizes, or you can put it all together and use it in one. That can put a nice background in your art journal page really fast with those big old stamps. So you can find individual stamps as well. Like this was just a 1 stamp, but that's got some of my favorite things, keys, so you can cut them apart. I mean, once you start playing around with these things, the sky becomes the limit. The only limit you have is your imagination. I like textural kinds of things like that, the splats and things. These are some other textural stamps. Just, you know, just to put texture into things. I like to do a lot of layers in my art journal pages now. Very much unlike how I started with those illustrations, I do lots of layers of things now. So lots of stamping and stenciling and paint. And then a lot of your craft stores today have these bins of stamps that are $1 or $1.50. There's some nice little stamps in there, including occasionally you can buy alphabets, entire alphabets for $1 or $1.50. So getting started in art journaling does not have to be an expensive proposition. You can do it actually quite reasonably. Then you can take these little stamps like this, these little alphabet stamps, and you can stamp them as a block. So you can ink them and stamp them as a block in your page, or you can take them apart, and sometimes you have to use an X-Acto knife to kind of, you know, cut them apart. But they work really well to use them to, you know, spell out things on your page too. And then this is something I do with these little things. I ink them all up before I ever cut them apart. I ink them all up and I stick them in there and I stamp the bottom of the box. You just can't believe how much easier it makes putting your stamps back if you know where they're going to go in there. You know, let's say you only pulled out 5 or 6 stamps out of this. Well, it's so much easier if you can just look down in the little hole and you can just stick it back where it belongs. That's a trick worth knowing. Let me tell you, that's a trick worth knowing. Okay, let's get this stuff out of the way here. Now, a couple of other things you might want to incorporate into your art journaling as words. This is all different kinds of words about gratitude and thankful, and for everything give thanks, and so forth and so on. I really like words in my journals. Sometimes I write them in my journals, and sometimes I just stamp them with stamps that I purchase. So I'm always on the lookout for things like that also. These are stamps that I've carved myself, and there's a class that you'll be able to find on carving stamps. And these are carved, some of these are carved from erasers, some of these are carved from actual stamp carving material. And I use those, as you can clearly see, they've all been inked a lot. I've used them a ton. Be on the lookout for things like this, found objects in your stuff. This actually was the top of came off the top of a package of deodorant. And so you can just dip that in paint and stamp with that. You can always make big stamps also. And so this is one that I carved. And then if you take this and stamp it 4 times, you have a great huge piece. And there's another stamp on the back. So when you get the carving blocks, the stamp carving blocks that are thick like this, you can do double duty with them. And then one other thing I want to call your attention to, and that is a date stamp. And that's what this is. And it came from an office supply. And this is a date stamp, and I encourage you to date your pages. When you've completed a page, just dial up the date and ink somewhere and stamp it in your page someplace, because you will be glad you did as you go down the road and you look back at your pages and so forth. And this is another little fun way to buy stamps. These actually come with a holder that you can get. See, they're a little bit, there we go, a little tricky to catch on the camera without light reflecting in them. But these are self-inking stamps, and so they have a little cover on them, and you pull the cover back and then you can just roll them across your page. And you kind of have to be careful with where you use these, because the ink doesn't dry real quickly in these. And then you do want to put the cover back over, which is not as hard as I'm making it look. There we go. So you just clip the little cover back over it, and then you just store, I just drop them back in the little holders they come in. But you can actually get a handle that clips on here, and you can use the handle to roll them across. I find them just as easy to use like this. So those are some different kinds of stamps just to keep in mind. Now we're going to talk next about inks. So we're going to look at some kinds of ink. And there's a ton of different kinds of inks out there. So we're going to look at what we have in this little box of goodness. And I have a few other ones here too. Now, inks are great for lots of different things. If you have, for example, if you have stencils, like I showed earlier, the spray inks through the stencils are super, and they're really fun to do. So here's some examples of some spray inks. Now, spray inks come in two different ways if you purchase them. One way they come is as a permanent spray, where it dries to a permanent surface and it won't reactivate with water. And so these SEI tumble dyes, these are actually used for fabric, and you can see on there it says washable, ready to use, water-based, easy cleanup. And these are actually meant or designed for fabric. They work perfectly on paper as well. And so I have these in every color I can find them in. I love these, and they're not expensive, which is nice. And then I always write on them what they are, just so if I want to go buy it again, I know what the ink is. And it gives you instructions on the back, of course, shake it well and blah, blah, blah. So it comes in all different kinds of colors, but these colors are really, really super intense. And there are other textile spray dyes or spray inks out there as well. And so you know, don't hesitate to try things. You know, why not? Now, something else you can do with those is you can take these, you can buy these little containers in the place that I buy them is usually in the pharmacy section, in the travel section, because you know today you can't travel with lots of liquids, so they make you put things in these small bottles. So these are readily available and not very expensive, which is great. And so what I do with these is I put water in them, and then I put the dye. This has this one in it. Shake it up, and then I write on here what it is and about how much dye I put in it, and then you get a different color in your color range. For example, right here, this is the undiluted tumble dye right here, just sprayed random. There's no stenciling, there's nothing, it's just sprayed on the page. And then down here, this is where it's diluted, so it's a much pinkier tone than it is up here. This is where it's just really strong. And I also dropped some water on top of it. I just wanted to see what it was going to do. Would it actually reactivate with water at all? And before it was completely dry, it reactivated a tiny bit. Once it was dry, it did not. So And this is another one, also tumble dye, and a little different size bottle, but same kind of thing. Then you can get dyes or inks that will reactivate with water, but are still so much fun to use. And these are Diane Reevely's Delusions ink sprays, and she has an assortment of colors. These work especially well in her Delusions journal. They work beautifully in that. She has lots of techniques for using these sprays. They're very intense and they're very beautiful, intense colors. Wonderful stuff. But if you put water on these or anything very wet, they are going to begin to reactivate. This is not permanent like the SEI tumble dye sprays are. So this will start reactivating with water, but you know, they're really fun to play with. And part of the purpose of an art journal is to experiment, to see what the different, how the different things, the different art media react. And so part of that's just the fun of seeing what they do inside your art journal. Now, another kind of ink that you can get are the Liquitex, or there's another Daler Rowney, I think is another brand, and these are the acrylic inks. These are professional acrylic inks, it says on the label. And my experience with them is that they are indeed, because they are acrylic, permanent when they dry. And here's an example of those two inks. So this gold is very iridescent, sparkly. I don't know whether you can see that actually on the camera, but it's a really beautiful gold. And this is the cerulean, cerulean blue, and it is quite opaque. So some of the inks are transparent and some of them are opaque. Now you also can put them, and this, all I did was take these have droppers in them, and I dropped and actually kind of, you know, drew with the dropper on here, dropped on some ink, and I sprayed water on it and let them drip and that kind of stuff too. So you can use them straight out of the bottle, undiluted, or you can also take them and again with these little bottles that you buy at the pharmacy, you can fill it up. You can put as much water in as you want, actually. It doesn't matter. I had water up to about here in this little bottle, and this is a 2-ounce bottle. And then I put several droppers full, anyway. I put the whole dropper in here, several of them, like probably 3 droppers that were filled with the Liquitex ink in here, and I also added a couple of dropperfuls of the iridescent gold. And then when you can see the gold in the bottom, so you have to really shake this up. You have to really agitate it to use it, and you're probably not going to be able to see this on the camera. I'm going to try and tilt it and see if we can catch the reflection. It's these 2 spots right here, and I don't think we're going to be able to catch it in the light, but it does have a distinct glimmer from the gold. So you can make your own glimmer sprays that way too. And that's really nice to be able to do that, because for one thing, they are permanent and most of your glimmer sprays are not. So those are spray inks and dyes. Then you can get an assortment of inks that you can ink your stamps with. And here are some of the ones that I tend to use the most. These are distress inks, and again, you need to know the properties of the ink. The distress inks will reactivate with water, but that's part of what makes them so wonderful to work with. And they come in a wide assortment of colors. Then you'll have different kinds of permanent inks, and they're made from different kinds of makeup, chemical makeup. And so the Stays-On ink is a solvent-based ink. It's an ink that you either like or you don't like. I love it, and some people don't like the odor associated with Stays-On. I don't mind it, so I enjoy it and use it a lot. It comes with a plastic holder, and you want to keep that with your ink pad, and you want to leave it this way. It's kind of an annoyance to have to deal with it every time you want to use your ink pad, but this helps keep your ink pad fresh. Don't glue it into the lid of your covering lid, because it doesn't go down tightly enough over your ink pad to preserve it. And then each one of the ink pads comes with these little labels, and so you can just simply spread some of the ink on it, and that way you can tell what it is, when you just look at it. See, I don't have any idea what that one is if I put it in the wrong way in my storage bin. So, StazOn ink. That's a solvent-based ink. If it gets on your skin, it's a little tough to get it off, but that's that's the way it is. This is Memento. This is another really nice black ink. There are things that art journalers have in multiples. One is black ink and another is white pens. I don't know. We just are always in search of the perfect black ink, the perfect white pen. This is a dye, fade-resistant dye ink. And so this is a really nice, really strong black ink. This is another black ink, and this is VersaFine. If you enjoy stamps with a lot of detail, and you want to use those in your art journal, and you want to get the really detailed impressions, all the little detail bits and things. For example, if you wanted to be able to stamp this stamp right here in its cursive writing, or this one that has like ledger bits on it, if you wanted to stamp that and get all those little nuances of the stamp, this is the stamp pad that you want to use. So I don't understand exactly why it works the way it does. Some people would probably be able to tell you that. I don't really care. I just want it to work. And then this is another kind of permanent ink. This is the archival ink, and it comes in all different colors. And this is the newer packaging. This is the older packaging. It comes in all different kinds of colors. It's acid-free, permanent, and waterproof. So when it's waterproof, when the ink is waterproof, it means that you can stamp it, and then you can come on top of it with other stuff, like you could spray on top of it, and it's not going to move and reactivate with other wet stuff put on it. Like you could glue stuff on top of it, and it's not going to reactivate. Where the distress inks, you can't do that with. This needs to be, you either need to use it the way it's intended to be used, which is to get special effects with it, or you use it as a final layer in things so that it, so you're not coming back over the top of it with something else that's wet. So there you go. That's kind of an intro to ink. So the next thing, I'll put something here, sorry. I wasn't watching the focus point on the camera. Sorry, guys. The next thing we're going to talk about is pens. And this is the short version about pens. So we're going to take a look at some of these pens here. Get some of this out of the way. Okay, these are some of my pens. Now I have a whole assortment of pens back here in a, let's see if I can show it to you. Yeah, see back here, right back there, this whole big thing. That's part of the pens that I have. We're always looking for the pens to use when you art journal. I don't know what it is, but I've told you before, it's a sickness. Some of the stuff is a sickness, but it's kind of a fun sickness. Anyway, let me show you some of the pens that you don't have to have all these by any means. But having getting some of them to start with is you'll enjoy having them in your art journals. So I'm just going to randomly pull them out of here so you can look at them. These are just Sharpie pens. These are, they come in different colors. They come in different pen nib tips. Some of them are called fine point, and I don't think they're fine at all. Some of them are extra fine, some of them are really super fine, and they're nice to use in your art journals. One of the things that's cool about using a Sharpie which I do frequently, I'll use a Sharpie pen like this, a black one. And this has the retractable tip. You can use this and you can write in your art journal page. I do a lot of journaling, literal journaling, writing things, getting crap out of my brain onto paper, but then I don't want it to be left for people to read, because it's just literally my for lack of a better term, it's brain dump. You know, I just dump stuff on the page. And then you can paint gesso or paints over the top of it. And some of the Sharpie ink will ghost up from the bottom, but it's not enough that you can actually see what you've written. So that's a cool technique. So those are Sharpies. These are called, they have a big B on the end. These are the Pitt, Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Big Brush Pens. And they are, they have a big tip on them. They come in an assortment of colors. They are really fun to use in your art journals. But you'll have to test to see whether, when you're working with markers, you'll have to test the paper to see whether it shows through on the following page. Because some markers do that and some markers don't. Your felt tip markers. These are the smaller nib, the smaller tipped Faber-Castell markers. And so you can see how tiny that nib is. And this is the size S. And they're marked on the ends. There's S and there's M and there's, I don't know, there's all different ones. And these also come in metallic. And you can see that is a broader tip than the one I just showed you. And this is a metallic, this is Faber-Castell, this is a Pitt Artist Pen, and they're always labeled on the side as to what they are. But the metallic ones you can get in a set of gold, copper, and silver. And then you can also get them in other sets. This is multi-mark. And again, a very fine little tip on it. But the Pitt pens are permanent and again won't reactivate with water. So that's handy information to have. These are paint pens. So all of these are paint pens. Whoops, not those. These are all paint pens. Now, they're all made by the company. Well, most of these are made by the company Sharpie. This big long one is not, but the rest of these, like this, that have the white barrel with the colored cap, those are made by Sharpie. This one on the top is an oil-based. I don't know if you can see that right there. Oil-based. And these are smelly. They do make some nice marks. They do some nice stuff. But they are, you need to use them in a really well-ventilated area. And then this one is a calligraphy pen. And so it has a chisel tip, where the rest of them are bullet points, but they're paint. All of these are paint. That's why they're banded, why I rubber band them together. And that's typically how I store my pens. I will put rubber bands, or some people call them elastics, around pens that are the like kind so that I can kind of keep them together. Now these are also by the Sharpie company, and these are poster paint pens. And these are water-based. So you can see right there, it says water-based. Right there. And these do not smell, and they are super. I like these a lot. Some people have a very specific preference, whether they like the oil-based or the water-based. And my advice is, if I had to choose one, I would choose the water-based ones. But that's my preference. You have to try it and see what you think. Then there's a company called Sakura, S-A-K-U-R-A. And Sakura does a whole line of these beautiful pens. And these are just some of them. They're not all of them by any means, but these are some of their beautiful pens. These are the glaze pens. They have a shiny cap, and these are the glaze pens, and they have a slightly raised surface when you write with them. Now, when you're art journaling, you have to try the pens out, because some of them don't write over acrylic paint, some of them write over acrylic paint great. You just have to try them out and see. but these are the glaze pens. You can see that these have a more opaque, chalky look to the pen cap. This brand is called, or this specific one is called Souffle. So you can see the difference in the pen cap, and so that will give you a hint as to what your result you're going to get. So this is a chalkier result, and it's really quite a nice result. And this one, when you write on your paper, you don't see the color right away. It dries and it comes up, so the final color takes a couple minutes for you to be able to see it. And the glaze pens, you have to allow that ink to dry well or you'll smear it. So that's those. These are gorgeous, and I'm going to show you examples of what these look like in just a minute. These are the gold. They're called Sakura or Jelly Roll Gold is what they're called. So Jelly Roll Gold, and you can see they're different. They have a bit of a more muted look. The pen cap is a little bit more muted in tone in the gold pens than like on the Jelly Roll or on the glaze pens. The glaze pens are really bright. These are really cool. I'm going to show you the effect that they have. Jelly Roll, the Sakura Company Jelly Roll pens also are available in metallic, which is what these are. These are all metallic, and you can see it in the pen caps. And these three are banded together by themselves because I use these all the time. This is the Jelly Roll white pen. Another good, I told you, we're always in search of good black inks and good white pens. This is a really good white pen, the Jelly Roll white pen, and they usually come 2 in a package. Sometimes you can find them where you can buy them singly. The Signo company also has an excellent white pen. You know, we are always in search of the good, perfect white pen. These are really good ones. This is a really fun pen. I like this one a lot. Usually you find this in sets of 2. Occasionally you find them singly as well. And they also have these now in colors. And this is called the Crystal, or the Star is the kind of Jelly Roll pen that this is. And it always has this little shooting star on the pen cap. The only one that I have in this kind is this one I'm showing you, which is called the Clear Star. And then if all else fails, and really that's not a good way to say it. A good thing to have on hand are ballpoint pens. These are just the inexpensive Bic, company Bic, B-I-C, inexpensive ballpoint pens. Now, different kinds of ballpoint pens work really well or better than others in your art journal, so try them out. But these work. These just write over everything. Absolutely write over everything. So let's put these pens back in here just as a, this is just a container, a small sampling of pens here. Now what I do is when I get new pens is I will take 2 different paper bases. This is black cardstock and this is just an off-white cardstock. And so then I write on the cardstock to test the pens to see how they turn out. And I write the name of the pen with the pen. Okay, so this is the Jelly Roll metallic pen that I'm writing with. And whether you can tell that it's metallic or not, let's try try a different camera here and see if we can actually see if we can see this a little clearer. So this is the metallic pen. See if I can get it to shimmer for you. You can see a little bit of the shine in it right in this on this one. You can see a little bit there too. They really have a nice metallic look to them. And I did the very same thing over here on the black cardstock. So this is done with the metallic pen, and the metallic pen shows up much more metallic on black than it does on the off-white. just for reference. This is the Jelly Roll Gold pen that I was telling you. And of course, sometimes I can't spell, but who cares? I'm just testing out the pens. So this is on the off-white and this is on black. Now, I'm not sure that you're going to be able to see this so well. The gold color shows up quite well on the black, but the color that's associated with the gold, because it has like the ink color and the gold shows up around it. And it shows up better on the off-white cardstock, but you can see it kind of shining in the light. These admittedly, you're going to have to get and play with yourself to really see the effect. This is the Soufflé pen, and this is the one that has kind of a matte ink, a matte color when it dries. This is the Jelly Roll Clear Star, and you can hardly see it here, but look at it on black. On the black, you can see this is a very, it really looks like a shining star. These are not terribly successful with trying to record these for you, but they are cool. So I recommend this pen a lot. I would definitely put this in your arsenal on your list of things to have in your stash. This is the Jelly Roll white pen. You can see how very white that is. And over here, I've even written it on this, and you can just barely even tell there's anything there. These are the glaze pens right here. And these dry with a little bit of a raised surface, a little shiny raised surface. That's a glaze pen. Here's the plain old Bic pens. Just plain old ballpoint Bic pens. On the black, the glaze pens don't even show up. There's glaze. You can see it just kind of shining in the light down here. The glaze pens don't show on the black other than just as a reflection. And these are the Sharpie water-based paint pens. So there it is in red, and my black is about gone. This is the Pitt pen, size small. And this is the oil-based Sharpie. So you can see the difference between the oil-based and the water-based. There is it tends to bleed a little bit more using the oil-based. And then on the black cardstock here, this is the Sharpie water-based pen. It's not quite as it still shows up as a pretty good white, but it's, you might have to go over it a second time. This is the same red as I used right here on this one. Shows up very, very nice and bright on the light color. On black, not so much. Doesn't show up as well. Here are the Bic pens. Now, what's funny about this is the Bic pen on black shows up different colors. So this is the blue one. This is the red one, which looks green, and this is the black one, which looks red. And the blue pen on the black cardstock looks brown. So there you go. And here are the Soufflé pens done on black cardstock. So those are some technical, just a way to show you what the pens look like. But I keep this kind of stuff on hand so you can just add your pens to it. As you get a new kind of pen, you can just test it out, write what it is. And that's pretty cool. All right, let's talk real quickly here about paint. So I've got different kinds of paints here. And so here we go. Paints. Now there's lots of paints on the market that you can get, and they all will work in your art journals for different purposes. If you're going to do watercolor, if you like to do watercolors in a journal, I would dedicate your journal to watercolor. Because watercolor will always reactivate with water. So if you get it wet and you accidentally spray some water on it, you're going to spot it or, make a mess. So I would, that's the only one I would dedicate. If I was doing watercolor, I would dedicate a journal just to watercolor. None of these are watercolor. These are all acrylic. So acrylics come in several different varieties. You can get them in tubes as professional or student grade acrylics. The more professional they are, the higher they are up the line of professional paints, the more pigment they have, which means the stronger they're going to be. And the more you can dilute it with water or other mediums and still maintain the integrity of the color. So those are great to use. You can get artist grade paints in that are fluid acrylics. There's a couple of different brands. The one that I happen to have is Golden, and these are highly, highly pigmented paints. You can get them. You can get a little trial size of the Golden paints in this little bitty size. This lasts a long time, believe it or not. This lasts me a really long time, and they even come in containers that are considerably bigger than these. These are pricey paints, but it doesn't take very much. Doesn't take much quantity-wise to use. You can also get craft paints, and I use I use all these paints. I use them all. The craft paints tend to be a little chalkier. They're not mixable in the same way that your artist grade paints. You can mix and you can maintain the integrity of the colors. The craft paints, it's kind of a crapshoot when you start mixing craft paints. Sometimes you get totally unexpected results, but that can be fun too. And don't forget about metallics, the metallic craft paints. Now, this is probably my favorite all-time brand in the metallic craft paints. This is probably my second favorite brand, which is the Folk Art Metallics. They're wonderful to use in art journaling. And then a relatively new line of craft paints that came out just not too long ago, I don't know how long ago, but not very long ago, are the distress paints. Now, these are a little different in that they have a dauber top, and you can paint straight from the bottle, or of course you can open the bottle and you can paint straight out of the bottle. You don't get a lot of paint in these dauber bottles, but they're really interesting colors. And when you're art journaling, you don't need a ton of paint, and so these little bottles will go along really quite a long ways in your art journaling. And then these are really fun paints to play with. These are Distress Crackle paints. And these are also acrylic paints. Everything I'm showing you is acrylic and will dry and be permanent. It won't reactivate with water. Now the Distress paints take a little while to dry. And until they dry, you can sprinkle water on them and you can do different things with water, and they will reactivate, or they'll not reactivate, but they will react with water. But once they're dry, they're good. The crackle paints are really interesting because you can actually paint them on a page, and as they dry, which takes a little while, they crackle, and then you can come over the top of them with another darker color or a stain or something, and you get some really interesting effects with the crackle paints. Of course, you're going to need some brushes, and my experience with art journaling is inexpensive brushes, perfect. Don't spend a bunch of money on brushes when you're doing art journaling. That's my opinion. All right, let's talk glue. Now, as I'm showing you all these things, you do not need all these things to art journal. I'm just giving you ideas for choices. And so if you had to start with one thing, if you had to start with one kind of paint to art journal, start with some craft paint, or start with a few tubes of the basics craft paints, or start with a few little dauber bottles of distress paint. You don't have to have all this stuff. It's just ideas. You need something when you're doing collage in your journal, which I'm going to show you some ideas for some different suggestions of things you might want to collage in your journals. When you do that, you're going to need something to attach stuff down. So there's a couple of ways to attach things. One is with tape. And so these are different kinds of tapes. There's washi tapes, which means they're really, really thin. And there's a specific kind of washi tape, but washi style tapes are great to use in your journal. This is just plain old masking tape, which is great. You can also get really thin tapes. You can see down here in the bottom, all these tapes down here, these are very, very thin, called tissue tapes. Now, my experience with tape in art journaling is I love to use tape, and I use it a lot. I'll use those in my journals, but I will always go back over the top of the tape with some other kind of glue, whether it's matte medium or collage podge, which is another one, or Mod Podge, or something over the top of the tape. That way I am ensured that it's not going to come up. The tape is not going to release. So these are thin glues right here. These are thin, and they're great for putting down paper. If you have things that are thicker, elements that are thicker, or ephemera, or cardstock, or things like that, or package material, or just stuff like that that you want to put in your art journal, then you need to use something that is thicker, like the Aleene's Tacky Glue, a thicker white glue. If you have little bitty things that you want to put, little tiny paper things that you want to put in your art journal, this is a great glue. The quick dry adhesive is really good for putting small things in your journal. It dries so fast that you can't put it over great big large areas. And this is my experience. You'll need some kind of glue brush if you're working with these paints like this, or these glues or mediums like this. And a dedicated brush. I dedicate brushes for glue brushes. So I have a container of water that just has glue brushes sitting in it all the time, and I dry them off, and then I use them with my glue. So if I'm dedicate a brush to glue, that's what it goes for forever. And of course, you're going to need some scissors to cut stuff out when you're working in your art journal. And then we're going to talk about stuff that you might use to stick in your journal. Okay. That you might use to put in your journal. One of the things that I like to use is I like to use words and quotes. And so I have a little book that I write quotes in all the time. When I find things, I just write them in here, and then when I'm doing an art journal page, I can go through here and see if there's some quote or some word that I want to pull from this little book. So I use that. I also use the internet as a great inspiration or a great place to look for quotes. And then I use an assortment of stuff that I glue in my pages. So I like to use music paper. And the older it is, the more yellowed it is, the more fun it is to use. So there's all kinds of music paper you can find at secondhand shops. Sometimes you can find it at garage sales. Sometimes you can find a music teacher that is getting rid of her stash of stuff, and you can use that. This is just came from books that, those freebie books that you pick up on newsstands. These are game books. These are fun to use as background papers. You can use paper with people's interesting handwriting. And I can't read that for anything, but I think it's really interesting. Now, the ink on this may smear when you put something wet on it, so just know that. Same thing with this. This is my own handwriting, and so oftentimes I'll use things with my own handwriting just to put in the book. This kind of stuff, this is packaging that came out of some piece of computer equipment that has every language known to man. Well, not quite, but you know what I mean. And it's fun to use things like the characters and the different styles of alphabets and things in your book. Dictionary pages are great. Just text pages out of books are great. Chart, if you can find math books or statistics books where you have charts and things like that, those are a lot of fun to use. Equations, any of that kind of stuff. That's fun to use in your art journals. Hymn books are great. Other kinds of things, thin things are fun to use. This is old sewing pattern tissue. Napkins. Napkins come in dozens and dozens and dozens of patterns today, and they're really fun to use in your art journal pages. Tissue paper is great. You can use tissue paper that you stamp on with some of your stamps. And as long as you use ink that is permanent, you can collage that down and you get some really beautiful patterns. There's also various kinds of tissue papers or wrapping papers that you can use. And then one of the things that you'll find yourself doing probably is collecting images. And so I go through and collect images a lot. I'll get some of this out of the way here. I collect images in magazines and wherever I find them, and then I go through and sort them into folders that I store in a file cabinet. So these are just all different kinds of things that I might use. I like clocks and gears and watches and stuff like that. And so I collect, and I don't care that that's blurry. That's fine with me. It's still usable in an art journal. So you can do things in art journals that you wouldn't do in other, maybe when you were making cards or whatever. And then I have a file called food, and anything that is interesting kinds of food things. I may not end up using this as a food page. I may end up using things, this image may end up being hair on something instead of green beans, Sometimes I collect images just because I love how pretty they are. And then I'll turn around and use those on a page about who knows what, So I go through and I like, things about fish and sea life. So I have calendars. Calendar pages are wonderful sources of collage material. Old calendars, or when they're getting rid of the calendars, at the after the first of the year. This one is all about birds. Lots of bird calendar pages. All kinds of things. So that is another one of those things that I love to collect is images, and because I like to use them in my art journals, or I use them for other kinds of inspiration as well. And then your cleanup material that is really nice to have. This is a baby wipe container of baby wipes. They are unscented, and I have to tell you, I'm a little too old to have a baby. I hate to admit it, but it's true. I'm a little too old to have babies now. And so sometimes they look at me a little funny when I go in to the grocery store and I buy containers of baby wipes. I don't feel compelled to tell them or justify anything to them. So don't you do that either. just buy some baby wipes. I do buy the ones that are unscented. And I personally don't find that it matters from one brand to another. Some people are very picky about the brand that they use. I don't care. I just want it unscented so I don't have to smell it. And you can use the baby wipes for cleanup. You can use them to blend paint. When they get all painty and lovely, then you can dry them, and then you can use them for other things in your journals. I mean, you can do some amazing things with baby wipes. They're pretty tough, and so they are great to use. Okay, so that gives you a tour through how to get started at art journaling. You got to have some stuff to art journal. You don't have to have all the stuff by any means, but you got to have some stuff. And we didn't even touch on colored pencils and things like that. So, I mean, there's essentially, what do you need? You need to have some kind of surface to work on, which I would get a sketchbook, or not a sketchbook, but a mixed media book of some kind, or you can use a sketchbook if you want. Doesn't matter. It's up to you, whatever you want to use. But I would suggest some kind of visual journal or mixed media journal or the Delusions journal or a composition notebook. So you need a surface. You also need to have some kind of stuff to make marks. Okay, so that would be like some paints or some markers or some spray inks or something like that. You need some things to make marks, and you need some glue. And basically from there, just the sky is the limit. Just go for it and just have fun and just see what kinds of things you can do. It doesn't matter. It's your own personal space to express yourself in the way you want to express yourself. So the real thing about an art journal is just get out there and do it. Don't be afraid of it, and just have fun. So until next time, I hope you'll be inspired to do some art journaling or collect some stuff and get brave. Just go for it. See what you can come up with. And we will have, of course, all other kinds of classes available for you with all other kinds of subjects. And I really do appreciate you joining me today for this class. There are class notes that you can find beside the video. If you have questions, send me an email. And other than that, I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me. I'm Barb Owen of Barb Owen Designs and How to Get Creative, and I'll see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.